That's what I would anticipate, yes. Okay. Julia, nice to see you in the White House briefing room.
Hi, thank you. Will Obama be responding to the comments that Boehner made yesterday on immigration, that he be poisoning the well? And will that in any way urge the president to maybe budge a little bit on his timeline for executive action?
Julia, the president did get this question, I think, on a couple of occasions at the news conference that he did on Wednesday. The president was pretty clear about his position on this, and I don't anticipate that it's going to change. The fact of the matter is that the president has the opportunity within the confines of the law to take some actions that we know would be good for the economy, good for the deficit, good for border security, and good for the millions of immigrants who are currently living in the shadows in this country. There's an opportunity for us to address some of these challenges that are caused by a broken immigration system that people on both sides of the aisle acknowledge is broken. And it should be it shouldn't, I guess I should say, it shouldn't be a surprise that this is something that the president is very focused on. He's been talking about this for some time. He's provided ample opportunity for House Republicans to allow the compromise piece of legislation that was passed through the Senate to come to the floor of the House of Representatives. The legislation that passed through the Senate was supported by 14 Republicans. It's a compromise proposal. The president himself has acknowledged he didn't get everything that he wanted in that piece of legislation, but it does reflect the general principles that the president has laid out, and it does reflect the kind of bipartisan common ground that's been the subject of so much discussion in the last 72 hours or so. So there is an opportunity for Speaker Boehner and his Republican colleagues to prevent the president from taking executive action. What they can do is they can bring up that bipartisan Senate bill to the floor for a vote, and the president would happily use his pen to sign that piece of legislation instead of the executive actions that Secretary Johnson and others have been so hard at work on over the last several months.
Okay, but that would have to, of course, come probably within the lame duck. I mean, in other words, Obama isn't taking any hope and possibly moving off his timeline. I know there were reports, there were even discussions this summer between Boehner and Obama that broke down over immigration, and now the Republicans have taken back Congress. There's some talks about what they would do if Obama expanded work permits, or how much they would work to block anything that he passes. Is there any talk on those lines of moving back a timeline past the holidays?
Well, I saw that the short answer to your question is no. I saw that Speaker Boehner himself was asked in the news conference that he did yesterday about whether or not he would make a specific commitment to bringing up immigration reform legislation, and he declined to do so. That has been his posture for well over a year now, and has been a posture that he's adopted in spite of the fact that there is bipartisan legislation that's already passed the Senate that shares strong bipartisan support across the country. There's the business community, the evangelical community, the labor community, and others have strongly supported that compromise piece of legislation that passed through the Senate. So, it does seem to me that the only people who are opposed to this compromise piece of legislation are certain segments of the House Republican Conference. I don't think it's a coincidence that those same members are encouraging the president, or at least warning the president, I think in some instances, to not take executive action on immigration reform. It seems to me that's less rooted in some sort of philosophical objection to executive action, and more rooted in their opposition to common sense immigration reform. So the president has the opportunity before him to do something really good for the country. And I do think the message that the president and other Democrats and even some Republicans heard resoundingly from the voters is that they want their elected representatives in Washington, D.C. To not get bogged down in politics and to actually focus on the kinds of steps that they can take that'll be good for the country and good for middle-class families in this country. And the executive action that the president is considering on immigration reform falls very cleanly in that category. Okay, Michelle.